The city woke each morning wrapped in a blanket of noise. Engines, footsteps, distant sirens. But beneath the overpass near the old subway entrance, silence had a way of lingering. It clung to the concrete pillars like damp mist, curling around the ankles of the people who hurried past. None of them looked twice at the girl who sat on the ground, a worn sketchbook resting on her knees, her fingers smudged with charcoal dust and rain. Her name was Layla, 24 years old, though the city had aged her more quickly than time should have allowed. Once, she had a home somewhere beyond the memory of foster houses and thin mattresses, somewhere before the streets became her only map. Now she lived between the hum of trains below and the sigh of traffic above, drawing faces she would never see again. Each morning she arranged herself carefully, back against the wall, knees folded, jacket sleeves rolled to the elbows, and waited for the first commuters. She didn't beg, she offered portraits. "You sit, I draw," she would murmur, her accent soft, her smile small. Most ignored her. Some paused long enough to drop coins into the paper cup beside her, never waiting to see what she might create. But Layla drew anyway. She drew because lines and shadows didn't judge. They listened. The pencil moved almost on its own, guided by the memory of 1,000 fleeting glances. The old woman with shopping bags became a queen with silver hair. The child with mismatched shoes turned into an angel with wings made of chalk dust. Every stranger carried a story, and her sketches were the only way she could keep those stories from vanishing into the noise. When she finished each portrait, she pinned it to the cracked wall behind her using bits of tape scavenged from trash bins. Over weeks, the wall became a gallery, faces layered on faces, eyes gazing at eyes. Some smiled, some stared in confusion. All were pieces of a world that moved too fast to remember itself. Layla often thought the wall knew her better than anyone alive. On cold mornings when her fingers stiffened, she would warm them around a paper cup of coffee that a volunteer named Mara brought from the shelter down the street. Mara always arrived before sunrise, carrying 2 cups and a kind smile that reached her tired eyes. "Still drawing the whole city, sweetheart?" she would ask. Layla would nod. "It keeps me from disappearing." Mara never pressed for details. She simply sat for a few minutes, sipping her drink, sometimes letting Layla draw her too. Her portrait hung near the center of the wall, a face shaped by kindness, surrounded by rough strokes of light. Then Mara would go, and the day would begin again. Hundreds of footsteps, a river of motion. Layla blended into it like a note hidden in a song. Among those rushing figures was a man in a gray coat who passed the same way every morning at 8:30. He carried a leather tube for architectural drawings and an umbrella with a polished wooden handle. His pace was steady, his eyes distant. Once in a while, he tossed a coin into Layla's cup without slowing. She started calling him the silent man in her thoughts. Something about him fascinated her. Not his clothes or his wealth, but the loneliness he seemed to wear like a perfectly tailored suit. She memorized the tilt of his chin, the lines that folded near his eyes, the faint scar above his right eyebrow. When he disappeared into the crowd, she began sketching him from memory. Each stroke brought a strange ache, as though she had known that face somewhere long ago. She tried to dismiss it. People resembled one another all the time. The city recycled faces the way it recycled rain. Still, when she finished his portrait, she stared at it for a long while. The eyes were gentle but sad, filled with something unspoken. She taped the drawing near the top of the wall where passers-by could see it. That evening, Mara returned with blankets and soup from the shelter. She studied the new sketch. "You've outdone yourself," she said. "He looks like he's thinking about someone he lost." Layla shrugged. "Maybe everyone is." Rain began to fall, fine, silver threads cutting through the dim light. Layla watched reflections ripple across the puddles, feeling an odd peace settle in her chest. Rain made the world quiet enough to remember. Later that night, when the streets emptied, she curled beneath her thin blanket and opened her sketchbook. Between its worn pages lay a small photograph, edges cracked, colors faded. A man held a toddler in his arms, both smiling beneath a tree. The picture had survived years of rain and folding. The faces were blurred except for the child's, a little girl with wide, curious eyes. Layla ran her thumb over the man's face. Most of the image had washed away, but a tiny scar was still visible just above his eyebrow. She stared at it until her vision blurred with tears she didn't let fall. Then she closed the book and whispered to the night, "Good night, whoever you were." Morning returned with the echo of train brakes and murmuring engines. The first commuter dropped a coin, then another. Layla drew until her hands grew numb. When the silent man appeared again, she looked up, startled by the way sunlight caught the silver in his hair. He glanced toward her wall of faces, slowing slightly, his gaze lingering on his own portrait. Then he looked at her. For a heartbeat their eyes met, a flicker of recognition on both sides, though neither could name it. He gave a small nod, left another coin, and continued on. Layla sat motionless, the world tilting around that single glance. Something inside her whispered, "Remember." That evening she began another sketch, this time larger, more detailed. She wanted to capture the truth behind his calm expression. Charcoal smeared her fingers, dark dust settling like ash. She drew until the light faded, then held the page away to see. The resemblance to the man in the photograph was undeniable now. The same scar, the same eyes, the same shadow of sadness. Her heartbeat thundered. She flipped open the photograph again and compared them side by side. The man who passed her each day, the silent man, was the one who had once held her as a child. But that couldn't be. Her father was gone. He had vanished after the night everything burned. She closed her eyes, remembering smoke, sirens, the cry of someone calling her name. Then nothing but darkness and years of movement from one foster house to another until the streets became safer than people. Could he still be alive? Rain hammered the pavement the next morning, but Layla stayed at her corner anyway. She waited for him, sketchbook open, nerves buzzing. Hours passed. He didn't appear. By noon, the coins in her cup had filled with water. She picked one out, rubbed it between her fingers, and smiled bitterly. "Guess it's just us again," she murmured. That night she could not sleep. She tore through old pages, searching for signs, any hint that fate had been leading her here. Between two drawings, she found a scrap of newspaper from years ago. An article about an architect named Daniel Hale, praised for his designs of public housing for orphans. The picture beside the article showed him younger but unmistakable. The same scar, the same eyes. Her breath caught. Hale, the name from the back of her photograph. For my little Layla. Dad. The truth arrived not with fireworks but with a quiet, painful clarity. The man who had been walking past her for months was her father.